Do you want to have dinner with us? A little girl asked the paralyzed poor girl alone on Christmas. Christmas evening had wrapped the city in a quiet, aching beauty. The kind that made loneliness feel louder instead of softer. Snow fell gently, covering broken pavements and tired benches, hiding cracks the way people hid their pain. On the far side of a small park, under an old stone arch, a young woman sat alone in a wheelchair. Her hands folded tightly in her lap as if holding herself together was a job that required effort. Her name was Clara, though no one nearby knew it. And no one had asked in a very long time. She had once walked through this same park without counting the distance between breaths. Once laughed without measuring the cost of hope. But life had not asked her permission before changing everything. An accident, a hospital room that smelled of medicine and final decisions. A family that slowly disappeared when care became heavier than love. And a future that shrank into a single chair and a single bench. Tonight, Christmas lights shimmered around her. Especially the tall tree glowing behind the arch. But they felt like decorations placed for someone else's celebration. Clara watched families pass, couples laugh. Children tug at their parents' hands. And with every step they took, something inside her tightened. She was poor now, surviving on charity meals and quiet nights. And the wheelchair had become the first thing people noticed. The last thing they wanted to deal with. She had learned to lower her eyes before others could look away. To make herself smaller even when she could not stand. Her breath formed small clouds in the cold air as she stared at the snow gathering on her boots. Thinking of dinner she used to share. Plates passed across warm tables, voices overlapping. And the simple comfort of belonging. Somewhere in the distance, bells rang. And the sound felt almost cruel in its cheerfulness. She wondered, not for the first time, whether disappearing completely would hurt less than being seen and forgotten. Again and again. At that moment, a small figure stopped in front of her, breaking the rhythm of passing feet. Clara looked up slowly, expecting the usual curiosity followed by fear. But instead she saw a little girl no older than 6, bundled in a bright coat. Red gloves stretched forward as if offering something invisible yet precious. The child's cheeks were pink from the cold, her eyes wide and unafraid. Filled with a sincerity that made Clara's chest ache. Before Clara could turn away or prepare herself for disappointment, the girl spoke softly, her voice clear against the hush of falling snow. Asking a question that seemed impossibly simple and impossibly heavy at the same time. Do you want to have dinner with us? The words hung between them, warm and fragile. And for a moment Clara thought she had imagined them. That her loneliness had finally begun to invent kindness. She searched the girl's face for mockery or confusion and found none. Only an earnest hope, as if sharing dinner was the most natural thing in the world. Clara's throat tightened. And she struggled to answer. Her mind racing with reasons to refuse. With memories of pity disguised as generosity that had left her feeling smaller than before. She glanced past the girl and noticed a young man standing a few steps back. Watching quietly, his expression thoughtful. Not hurried, not embarrassed. He did not pull the child away or apologize. He simply waited, trusting her question. The simplicity of that trust struck Clara harder than any insult ever had. She felt something stir inside her. Something she had kept buried because it hurt too much to touch. Her lips parted, but no sound came at first. She wondered what kind of dinner they meant. Whether it was a grand table or a simple meal. Whether she would be expected to smile politely and leave quickly. Whether her presence would become awkward once reality settled in. Yet the girl's outstretched hand remained steady, offering not coins. Not sympathy, but company. Snowflakes landed on the girl's glove and melted instantly. As if even the cold could not survive that warmth. Clara finally found her voice, weak and uncertain, and asked why. The girl frowned slightly, as if the question itself was strange. And answered that no one should eat alone on Christmas. Those words pierced through Clara's defenses. Bypassing logic and pride. Reaching the place where hope still hid, bruised but alive. She felt tears threaten, not dramatic or loud. but quiet and dangerous, the kind that could unravel her if she let them fall. Around them, the world continued. People walked, lights flickered. Music played somewhere unseen. But in that small space under the arch, time slowed. Clara realized that this was not about charity or rescue. It was about being invited without conditions. She thought of how many times she had wished someone would simply see her. Not the chair, not the poverty. Not the burden, but the person she still was. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed one on the wheel beside her. Grounding herself in the present. She looked back at the men, who met her eyes and nodded once. A simple gesture that said the choice was hers. Clara took a breath that felt deeper than any she had taken in years. And though fear still lingered, it no longer stood alone. In that moment, beneath falling snow and glowing lights, with a child waiting patiently for an answer, Clara felt something shift. As if a door she believed was sealed had opened just enough to let light through. Clara hesitated only a second longer before she nodded. A small, almost invisible movement. But one that carried the weight of years. The little girl's face lit up instantly. As if the answer had been certain all along. And she turned back toward the men with excitement. Announcing the news with a joy that felt contagious. The men stepped closer then. Introducing himself quietly, his voice respectful. As if Clara were not someone to be handled carefully but someone to be met properly. He did not rush, did not speak louder than necessary. And that alone made Clara feel more at ease. Together, they began moving through the snow-covered park. The girl walking close to Clara's side. Talking freely about decorations she liked and food she hoped would be on the table. Unaware that every word was stitching something back together inside the woman she had just met. The wheelchair rolled over the path, the sound soft and steady. And Clara found herself listening to it not as a reminder of loss but as proof that she was still moving forward. Even if the path looked different than she once imagined. When they reached their modest home, warmth greeted them immediately. Not just from the heater, but from the feeling that this space had been prepared with care. The dinner was simple, nothing extravagant. Yet it was placed on the table with attention, as if each dish mattered. Clara noticed how the girl insisted on helping. How the men smiled at her patience. And how no one looked at Clara with pity when she struggled slightly to adjust her position. They waited for her, naturally, without making it a moment. As they sat together, conversation flowed easily, not forced. Not heavy with explanations. Clara shared pieces of her story slowly. Not the dramatic parts, but the human ones. About dreams she once had and small things she still loved. She was surprised to hear herself laugh at one point. The sound unfamiliar but real. And she saw the girl watch her with curiosity. As if discovering something wonderful. After dinner, they sat quietly, listening to the hush of the night beyond the window. And Clara realized she had not checked the time once. The loneliness that usually pressed against her chest was absent. Replaced by a gentle calm. When it was time to leave, the girl hugged her without hesitation. Arms tight and warm, and in that embrace, Clara felt something settle inside her. Something that had been restless for too long. Outside again, under the same sky and falling snow. The light seemed brighter than before. Not because the world had changed, but because she had. As the man walked with her part of the way back, he spoke honestly. Saying that kindness did not require permission or perfection, only presence. Clara thanked him. But she knew the true gift had come. From a child who had asked a question without fear. When she finally returned to her bench, it no longer felt like a place of exile. It felt like a pause. A moment between chapters of her life that were still being written. She looked at her hands and realized they were no longer clenched. Somewhere in the distance, laughter echoed, and instead of hurting, it gave her comfort. Clara understood then that being seen, even once, could change the way a person carried their pain. And as she sat there, breathing in the cold air with a quiet smile, she held on to the certainty that connection, no matter how small it seemed, could be enough to remind someone that they still belonged in the world.